The Lord Mayor made the comment that I was the Deputy Commissioner of Road Safety, and we, the team, we were lucky enough to deliver 3 record low road tolls, the first time that had ever occurred in our history. But I was also the first Deputy Commissioner of Road Safety to be booked by a speed camera. And whilst I've got the microphone, I would like to thank the Herald Sun. I think, Simon, you were the editor at the time, for giving it such a thorough going over. Only joking. I also perhaps just need to think back to a stage I shared with Peter Mitchell probably 18 months or so ago now, Peter, wasn't it? I don't know if anyone remembers. I think, Simon, were you there when we had these problems? We thought, Simon or Peter thought it was a good idea for me to do a stand-up at Federation Square. We did the news live, and I was, I think, the second person. And it was about the time, Lord Mayor, where we were having some challenges with our friends from Occupy Melbourne. And we're standing there doing our piece live to camera, Peter, weren't we? And we could see this throng of people. They were coming downstairs with placards and dreadlocks coming towards us as we were trying to make some sense of crime in the city at the time. So I'm not sure if the bulletin ended up finishing or not live to air, but it was certainly an experience. And if anyone's wanted to go onto YouTube and have a look at it, it's quite funny actually to see the Chief Commissioner and Peter not sure what we do with all these people poking placards in our face and the like. So it was interesting. I was also really thankful, Peter, when I came here. Peter was making me feel comfortable about what the day would look like and when I would speak, and he did mention to me that Jeff Kennett spoke last year for half an hour without one note. So thank you, Peter, for making me feel nice and relaxed. Can I acknowledge you, Lord Mayor, and I said to Bev when you came up and started speaking, you make me proud to be a Melburnian. You do a wonderful, wonderful job, and all power to you and your council. To the Deputy Lord Mayor, Susan Riley, to other councils from the city, Campbell Walker, the Chairman of Melbourne Day Committee, to Bev, the new President of the Melbourne Business Network, and Bev, good luck to you with your new role. Mark Baker, the Melbourne President from the Melbourne Press Club, and of course Peter Mitchell. I acknowledge all of your presence, and also to my police colleagues who are here today. I thank you for your ongoing support. So again, thank you everyone for the very warm welcome today. I do appreciate it. I make the point that Melbourne is a wonderful city, and it's a city that deserves to be celebrated, and that's what we're doing here today, and I'm very glad and very proud to be a part of that. Peter made the point, though, it'd be interesting to know, wouldn't it, what those people all those years ago when they landed on the North Bank thought that this place might look like so many years later, and I'm certain they would have had no sense at all that they were seen, they were the genesis of one of the great cities in the world. And it would have been even more difficult for the original custodians of the Kulin Nation, who also would have witnessed that event. I suspect they would have looked on with some amusement, perhaps even some alarm, what happened over the next 12 months. 13 buildings were erected. Another 138 white men and 34 white women joined the 6 original landers. 26,000 sheep arrived, 57 horses, and over 100 head of cattle had arrived in Melbourne. So it's probably very appropriate for me at this point to acknowledge the people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of this land on which we meet today. It is upon their ancestral lands that this place is built, and I pay my deepest respects to their elders, both past and present. The Lord Mayor pointed out that I am Victoria Police's 21st Chief Commissioner, and policing is arguably the oldest institution in Melbourne, having its genesis when John Batman requested of the New South Wales Governor some police to come to Melbourne. And he dispatched 3 strong, tall, strapping young men. And as Robert Haldane wrote, and some of you in the room know of Robert's work, he wrote the seminal history of Victoria Police, the People's Force. He made the comment that those first police arriving set a pattern for police development in Port Phillip that exists up until this day, where the provision of police service is rarely planned but is an ad hoc response to requests. So he's arguing that still exists right up until the mid-80s. The first commissioner of Victoria Police was a fellow called William Mitchell. In 1853, he brought together 7 different organisations to come together to be what is our great organisation, Victoria Police today. That included the City Police, the Geelong Police, the Goldfields Police, the Water Police, the Rural Bench Constabulary, the Mounted Police and the Gold Escort Police. He was a prominent Melbourne figure, Mitchell, but he had never served as a police officer. He hadn't sought the position of Chief Commissioner, but he managed to unify and join these organisations into a professional and effective group of people. Following the resignation of Mitchell, he only did about 2 years as Chief Commissioner. The convention of appointing police commissioners continued when another non-police person was appointed. The third commissioner was a fellow called Frederick Standish. Now, Standish was a colourful character. Now, being the Chief Commissioner at that time sounded pretty interesting, actually. So just bear with me. He was a Lancastrian, a former British Army officer. He had a penchant for the drink, the punt, and a tendency to carouse. He was a Catholic turned Freemason. It is claimed that he came to Australia to escape gambling debts and start anew. I hope there's no relatives of Mr. Standish in the room. He held a number of public sector positions, including the Assistant Commissioner of the Goldfields at Sandhurst, and he also had a short tenure as the Chinese Protector in Bendigo. So a perfect pedigree for a Chief Commissioner, I'd argue. He was the chairman of the VRC, a role that may not have well suited an unsuccessful gambler. But during his tenure at the VRC, he was credited with others with forming a horse race and calling it the Melbourne Cup. For those with an interest in horse racing, you may well be aware that the Standish Handicap, still run at Flemington on New Year's Day, is actually named in Standish's honour. He was first appointed Chief Commissioner in 1858, and although a man of considerable appetites, he was also a man of considerable administrative acumen. Now, there's some familiarities in what I'm about to say for me. Standish was forced to review police operations due to government cutbacks and reduced manpower against a backdrop of a rapid increase in the public's demand for police. The drivers of crime at the time were starting to emerge and be quite difficult. There was increased economic stress within the community brought on by the decline of the gold mining boom. There were sectarian tensions, you might remember, particularly from the Fenians. And there was a rising anger in the country districts of the colony brought on by the demands for land reform. I just make the point, Standish was the commissioner at the time of Kelly and obviously led the hunt for Kelly. So it was a difficult time for our community. So Standish's response to these challenges was to call for increased flexibility in the deployment of police. Sound familiar, Keith? He did this by advocating a policy of decentralisation, and he opened 60 new police stations right across our state. He wanted to adopt the use of new technology in the form of electronic telegraph and railways, therefore freeing up police to do policing roles. He wanted to remove police from non-policing roles like Treasury guards, Crown Land Rangers, searchers for customs and inspector of the slaughter yards. It's interesting to note that many of the small stations that Standish established, often situated one day's horse ride from each other, are still a part of our operational environment today. So he was only partly successful in his reformist agenda, and he did meet with very strong resistance from government. And this resulted with police still being straddled with many, many roles that took them away from their core duties. Now, I'm not sure that I have a lot in common with Standish. I have been a police member for 40 years. I don't gamble or carouse, nor do I drink to excess. And I'm unlikely to have a Group 1 race named after me in the near future. But apart from having the privilege to lead one of the state's greatest institutions, I do have something else in common with the state's third commissioner. Like Standish, I see the need to review and challenge the operational arrangements of Victoria Police. Victoria is transforming from its traditional manufacturing base towards a more service-oriented economy. We are all experiencing rapid technology, social and demographic change. Melbourne is also changing, and mostly for the better, I'd argue. Cited for the fourth year in a row by The Economist magazine as the world's most livable city, Melbourne is a vibrant, multicultural metropolis that is the arts and sporting capital of Australia. Prosperous, outward-looking and intellectual, Melbourne is internationally renowned for its restaurants, its nightlife and its sophistication. It is important that Victoria Police stops and reflects as to whether it's evolving quickly and effectively enough to meet the changing demands. Yesterday, as the Lord Mayor said, I released the state's crime rate. In the Melbourne CBD, again, a really good drop in crime as a result of policing efforts and efforts with local government and other members of the community. And I hope in some small way Victoria Police has contributed to this city's livability. Since the 19th century, Victoria Police has been shaped by the community we serve. However, the central question is, has the police force determined the course of its own development? The answer is probably, almost certainly, no, it has not. And again, I refer to Haldane. Since 1836, almost every important decision and action on the development of policing in Victoria has come from beyond the force. This is simply not defensible. Every Victorian has the right to expect its Chief Commissioner to look over the horizon. And like some commissioners before me, I see the need to review the operational arrangements for Victoria Police in the light of a rapidly changing environment. I know this will be enormously challenging. In the lead up to this year's election, the Police Association has called for 1,880 more police on the beat based on increased population. Now, let me stop there and be very, very, very clear about this. The men and women of Victoria Police, the men and women in uniform answering calls for assistance, will always be the absolute backbone of our organisation and our response to the community. They will always be the backbone. But a modern organisation needs increased flexibility in how police resources are used to tackle the greatest drivers of harm in our changing community. Emerging challenges such as organised crime, family violence, the destructive prevalence of ICE, and the explosion of cyber-related crime. These are problems that men and women driving around in divisional vans cannot fix. So, this brings me to the Victoria Police Blue Paper, which was released 2 or 3 months ago, and some of you may have had the chance of looking at it, but I'm sure most of you have heard some of the chatter about it in the media over the last little while. Those of you who have had the chance to read this document will now understand it is not a call to reduce frontline police, nor is it a call for mass police station closures, as some have argued. Although I see it again mentioned in one of the dailies today that it would result in stations closing. The Blue Paper argues we cannot afford to continue down the same path we have travelled for decades, indeed centuries. It paints a picture where our political masters cannot afford to just invest in a geographical uniform and police station response to crime now or in the future. If we do, crime rates will rise and the quality of police services will inevitably fall. But let me emphasise, the Blue Paper is not a plan. It's a vision for the future based on the best possible information and advice. It's an invitation for the community and its police to look to the future and think about how we might reform Victoria Police to address our changing environment. Policing is one of the oldest and most important of all services that government provides its citizens. And like many government services, it has inherited a legacy of structures and operational procedures from a time when the community was quite different. We still largely allocate police according to population, not to crime rates or emerging crime trends. We still have a geographical spread of resources based on 19th century patterns. We still have a distribution of police stations that has remained largely constant for over 150 years. This operating model now struggles to cope with an increased demand and changed public expectations. The model is simply not sustainable, in my view. But let me reiterate, the Blue Paper is not a step-by-step plan, it's a look to the future as how Victoria Police might change the way we operate. Nothing is set in concrete. We need to have the conversations. But it's a great starting point, and it gives government, the community, the association and the organisation to hold up the mirror to us, to see how we might get better. This piece of work is based on fact, it's based on research and extensive consultation with academia, government, police services both in Australia and around the world, as well as serving police and members of the public. One thing, and I come back to this point, one thing that came out of these consultations again, and it came out loud and clear, men and women in uniform will always be the backbone of our organisation. Without their visible police presence, without their visible presence in the community, we simply cannot succeed. But as an organisation, we do need to use our people more productively and more creatively with the ultimate aim to keep people and our community safe. And to do that, we need to plan for change. So let me just describe briefly some of the emerging problems the paper highlights. 000 calls, people calling for urgent police help, are outpacing the population growth. Serious and organised crime is growing rapidly, and it's becoming increasingly national and international in its nature. Reports of family violence, sexual abuse and fraud are rapidly increasing. Social problems are driving increased crime rates. Abuse of alcohol, family violence, child abuse, online sex offences and mental illness are all changing the way we do our business. Our changing demography means we have increased population diversity and density on the urban fringe. Our population is ageing. There are growing levels of disadvantage brought about by economic change. Rapidly changing technology has resulted in new ways of committing crime as well as new types of crime. And for many reasons, Victoria Police has failed to adequately invest in, plan or implement relevant technology. This has left our organisation in the last century. Our industrial arrangements severely limit our capacity to move police from one location to the other. And finally, The Productivity Commission points out strained government revenues resulting in a slowdown in revenue growth from 7% in 2010 to 3.6% today will mean tighter budgets into the future. So what's this all mean for us as an organisation? The paper makes a clear case that there is a mismatch between patterns of demand and allocation of resources. Clearly we need to change how Victoria Police operates into the future. So we've heard about some of the challenges. How can we address them? The paper proposes 3 key areas for us to focus on if we are going to achieve that change. We do need to better match resources to demand by rethinking our traditional operating model, by focusing on crime prevention, by focusing on the needs of the victim, by focusing on community engagement and community involvement in policing to help drive crime prevention. We're an organisation that's developed as crook catchers. We're really good at that. We're not so good at preventing the crimes before they've occurred. We need to improve our capability by reforming our workforce and technology. We can do this by increasing the diversity of police members so we better reflect the ethnic, racial and gender mix of the wider community. We can do this by increasing the capability of police members through increased training and changing how we recruit members. We can do this by improving information systems for frontline staff. And let me just give you one example. Currently, those men and women you see driving around the van in police cars spend 50% of their time in a police station doing paperwork, faxing documents, making notes. By having a mobile technology, we can actually reduce that 50% down to almost 10%. The savings are quite remarkable by sensible investment in policing. And finally, collaborating will be more critical into the future. As I said earlier, crime is now far more complex. And because of this, we cannot deal with these issues by ourselves. We need to forge partnerships and work collegiately and holistically with government departments, agencies, national law enforcement agencies, so we can address the issues such as family violence, corporate crime and the like. And we need to work far more closely with the business sector because crime is seeping into all areas of our community. Modern Melbourne is almost unrecognisable as to the frontier town of the mid-19th century. Multi-layered, multicultural Melbourne is now home to 3.6 million people and is famous again for its literature and its performing and visual arts, as well as unique culinary pleasures. It's a lifestyle worth protecting, and to do that we must continue to test and challenge the traditional approaches of Victoria Police. It won't be easy. Communities like their police stations. Politicians like to talk about police numbers. I understand these concerns and I understand these drivers. But now we have started a conversation with the community, the government, the opposition and the Police Association to work through these issues. So let me just finish with a quote from John Sylvester's article in The Age last Saturday. Ron Iddles, who's the Secretary of the Police Association, Iddles wants 1,880 extra cops, while Lay wants a new direction. Iddles has made an opening vendor's bid in a new law and order auction. Both the government and opposition will soon raise their hands and we will end up with more police. Nothing is surer than the fact that both parties will go down the Iddles path rather than the Lay one. I look forward to the next few months to see how this debate will play out into the community. And finally, if there is a political appetite for change, I look forward to shaping one of the best performing and most respected police organisations in the world, your Victoria Police. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Ken. We're going to take some questions from the floor, ladies and gentlemen. If you've got anything you'd like to ask our Chief Commissioner of Victoria Police. For a start, would you like a Group 1 race named after you, Ken? The Ken Lay handicap?
Probably not.
Anybody? Go ahead. Oh, yes, the race. Yeah. So,
I'd rather a computer system.
Just very quickly, Ken, one word you mentioned in amongst many very fine words, and I think there's a lot of us can think about a lot of what you said, but you mentioned the word ethnic. What's the ethnic mix of the Victorian Police Force now compared with what our general population mix is?
We've changed slowly. So we're now up to about 28% women. We don't actually record ethnic backgrounds of people we recruit, but you just need to look at Victoria Police, and largely we're white, we're Anglo-Saxon, we're middle-aged male. So there is an enormous amount of work to be done, and some of the tensions you actually see, it's well known some of the difficulties we've had with some African communities over 6 or 7 years ago, simply because we didn't understand as well as we should, and that's reflective of an organisation that needs to get better and a broader spread of all representing our community we serve.
yes, sir.
Rather than seeing policemen in cars, could we see policemen walking the streets?
Yeah. That's a good question. Often policing is characterised as a model that fits right across the state, and it doesn't. The policing model in Melbourne, the city of Melbourne, is based on men and women being highly visible and walking around. That doesn't work so well if you're in rural Victoria. So again, for the last 161 years, we've fallen into this trap where we think we'll put a police person in a station in a local geographical area and that'll fix the problem. So that was fantastic back in the 60s when the local, every town had a police station, or every suburb had a police station. Every suburb had their crooks. Every suburb's crooks did their burglary and thieving in their suburb. The local cops knew the local crooks and they took them to the local courthouse. Not anymore. One size doesn't fit all. Yeah. And men and women on foot are a very, very important part, particularly in Melbourne.
Something back there.
How about it? Is the ice epidemic?
It's awful. It is absolutely awful, and it's, as I say, the crime stats that I released yesterday, we spoke about a 3.7% increase across the state. The ice, and I think it's right to call it an epidemic, is reaching into many, many parts of people's lives. It's driving burglaries, it's driving assaults, it's driving family violence. Last year alone, we found 101 clandestine labs. 90% of those were manufacturing ice or amphetamines. We're a long way from solving this problem. And again, I come back to the piece about what Victoria Police looks like and that geographical model we had where we pile police into police stations to deal with local problems. People in police stations can't solve the issues of international crime syndicates. They can't solve the problems of organised motorcycle gangs. They can't do the work with people taking money off people, crooks seizing their money for their ill-gotten gains. We need to think more broadly about how we invest in our police. So it's not just people in police stations. Now, I need to make this point, and this gets lost a little bit in the narrative. We've got into a conversation, a public conversation, where the answer is either more police, 1,880 more police, or the answer is more people in task forces and with specialised skills. So that's a simple argument to have, either or. But the answer is a combination of both. It's not a binary argument. The answer is frontline police, well supported, with the skills and abilities to address these really, really difficult problems.
Yes.
Yes. So I've said publicly in the past, we think we could probably free up 400 odd police from prisoner keeping duties. For 160 years, we've been managing prisoners. Now, again, many of you would know that our cells have been quite full for the last 12 or 18 months while some new jails have been built. But when you've got 500 operational police who are extraordinarily expensive to train and equip, managing prisoners, which I would argue could be either done just as well and just as safely either through the private sector or some other sector part of government, I suspect there is significant savings to be made in that area. Our prosecutors, they do a wonderful job. Most of them are police. But in many other jurisdictions of the world, police use lawyers to prosecute. We've got 200 prosecutors across the across Victoria. So there's some really quick wins about where we could get additional police back on the street. But we need investment to employ the lawyers, and we need investment to employ the jail keepers. But I can assure you, or from my view, they would be jolly sight cheaper than police members.
So, you have one.
And what are your top 3 demands for the current state government?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
What are your next 3 demands, top demands for the next current state government?
I don't demand things from government. I do have conversations, and certainly the blue paper helps shape that. So certainly the conversation is around how Victoria Police, how we get our resources, how they're funded. So traditionally the model has been you'll get 1,000 police and they'll be funded as first or second year senior constable, and there's an expectation that they'll be put on the front line, which is the divisional vans. If you need to start investing in the more complex crimes, you need detectives. So they're more expensive than the police we're provided with. So we need to find that money from within to actually pay for the more expensive police. So certainly and Jack Rush in his inquiry into Victoria Police made this point as well. There needs to be a recognition that the current funding model is very, very restrictive. So all those 1,700 that we received in 4 years ago, there has been a cost to the broader organisation to actually move them into other areas where we need. Clearly the IT is an enormous problem for us. We can be much more efficient and free up a lot more patrol hours, or we can use our police very, very differently if we can get away from this paper-based model. And the other piece, we have this concept that only blue shirts can keep people safe. So again, there's this draw to invest in police, in sworn police. The very best jurisdictions in the world are very well supported by lawyers, analysts, the CSI types that actually back up the detectives. We get hold of the criminals' money. We chase the money rather than the crook. So there's whole ways we can disrupt organised crime, the ice trade and the like, if we've got the brain power to do it. And often we need to go outside the traditional policing model to do that. And again, some of the very best jurisdictions in the world do that. So that's some of the thinking, but we do need to get away from the model of one size fits all, because it simply doesn't. And if I can just give an example of that, You know, we've had 1,700 additional police over the last 4 years. You will see some local areas where we've poured police into where the crime rate's plummeted. You'll see other local areas where we've poured poured uniformed police into and the crime rate's gone up. Because the crime rate and the offending is not the same in every geographical area of the state. Like in some areas, ICE drives the crime rate. In other areas, public order drives the crime rate. And they're two very, very different responses. Just need to be a bit smarter about the way we invest.
I'll give you a quick blank sheet of paper. What would you do to solve the ICE?
Well, Robert, it is very interesting because it is not a problem we can arrest our way out of. It's a problem that needs to be addressed at one end with a primary prevention end of helping people that have got problems to get well. People that are offending in this space, give them the opportunity to rehabilitate themselves, have education programs, have health programs that allow people to understand their problems and actually address their problems. Once we start dealing with burglaries, once we start dealing with murders, once we start dealing with family violence, we've lost. So it is far broader. It's from the primary prevention end right through, and I'm not saying, again, it's a bit like what we do with police. There's not one answer. It starts at that end and it works all the way through to the other end.
Is there one over there? No. I just wanted to ask Ken a question. In conjunction with the City of Melbourne, a couple of years ago, drunken violence on King Street was a blight on the city, and as you've mentioned, the crime rates have come down. How have you been able to do that?
I think it's fair to say it's another problem you simply can't arrest your way out of. Certainly the enforcement and the high visibility of police is an important part of it, but, and I'm sure the Lord Mayor would agree, engaging with all the stakeholders, having the discussions, helping people solve their problem, investing in the problem, whether it's local government, whether it's police. There's not one answer, is there? It's complex and it's difficult, but might I say, any of these issues, whether it's been problems in the city or whether it's family violence, whether it's ICE, it requires leadership. And we have seen some quite remarkable leadership in Melbourne over the last 3 or 4 years with the Lord Mayor, as I've said. Rod Wilson was a fantastic advocate for police superintendent that did a wonderful, wonderful job engaging with the community, engaging with the groups, engaging with local government, making sure the investment was right, making sure the people were put in the right place, making sure we engage with media that they told the stories, the good stories as well as the bad stories. So it's a it's a complex solution, but it is that piece about none of this works. None of us can solve it by ourselves. And I think the Melbourne, if I can call it the Melbourne problem, was a really, really good case study of that.
Ken, on behalf of the Melbourne Business Network, we'd like you to accept this token of our esteem. Thank you very much indeed for your lecture today.
Thanks, Peter.
Ken Lay, ladies and gentlemen.